and it's mostly about making sure the messaging. If you know somebody who's like, okay, Democrats don't do anything, get the message out that okay, we have one more infrastructure bill that helps people. We're getting they're touting how much they're getting for roads and bridges, but now the human infrastructure. How's that? If that dude or dudette, can't get to that job, or it's more cost beneficial for them to stay at home because of quality childcare, or they want to go to work, but because of the childcare would eat into anything they've earned, they get childcare help. And you got to be careful on the childcare and all these others that private industry doesn't try to jackknife the prices on that child on the on the quality of that childcare and things that are coming within the human infrastructure. And remember, without the human infrastructure, there's not really any cash to pay for the hard infrastructure. So what the Mansion will do and Cinema will do, and their donors will say, "Get Mansion out there." So I got you this. Well, it didn't really do much, or it did much, but it didn't really do everything it promised. Well, you didn't get the second one through, but they're not going to try to let you know that. So it's very important to get this second one through, the second or the BIF for the Biden infrastructure, but I like to call human infrastructure because it is the human infrastructure of who we are, what makes things better. So let's go through. Well, this just hit me while I'm thinking about it. Human, I got too much stuff going on. This is this is really good if you ever get to watch that one. But she was mainly speaking about this, which is a great book. Yeah, I'm about to reread it. But anyways, let's see here. There it is. Build Back Better agenda. Let's say so. This is what's at stake. This is what needs to get passed next, and personally did not want to give up that leverage, but we have a secondary leverage which seems to scare the oligarchs more so, which is voting rights. Because there's a lot of things that were left out of the first package, such as college, letting workers be able to develop themselves at at a reasonable cost, and then having that education. So as I was thinking about this and looking at the history as I was thinking about it, especially when you're looking at the Pell Grants, soon as the Pell Grants were created to help African Americans or lower income Americans, which unfortunately we always tend to think is as being only African Americans, but in general it's not. It's to help either go to a community college or go to a 4 year or just get a trade. There's not anything there. There's they upped the prices and kept everyone in poverty. And then you had the Reagan Revolution, which, don't get me wrong, I'm all for lower taxes. That 90% tax thing just seems kind of like what the heck. But I also understand it. But yeah, it's not my thing. But I understand why it was so high, and especially when we're going to go into that a little bit later. But getting that out there, those things that were left out, that's going to be needed with voting rights. But to get what we need now, is the child tax credit. A lot of working parents love that. Without, and it can't have that the mansion thing where it cuts off. It was hilarious. It's like it has a means test, so it cuts off the people that actually need it, and then gives it to the child mansions thing, and then gives it only to a certain sliver who actually don't need it. It was ridiculous, and it shows. And there is something that happens when you're hungry. If you've been ever been to the point where you've just super hungry, you don't know where you're gonna get your next meal, and it's just like, and your stomach's growling and everything, and it's just I gotta keep going. It is a terrifying thing if you've ever never felt it, and I wish never to ever have anyone feel that. And to do that to these people lowers total productivity, at least in my opinion. I would like to see some data, but I think it lowers total productivity. If you've increased, you have a less worried worker, you have a less, yeah, they're not worried about their kids eating. They could go and work on the job. They're still going to be a jerk's going to be a jerk, doesn't matter what you do. But it gives good people the opportunity so they can become better people. Climate change. Here's all these jobs. These are jobs, 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 technical jobs. So you have to be trained, and that means that's, you know, if you know how to, if you're, say, you're a welder, and then it's you're gonna have solar. That's a very low. It's most of that jobs are put in at the are the capitals at the very beginning. It's front loaded. It's the same as actually same with power plants. It's actually seems like it's less persons on a power plant, conventional power plant. I mean, it's more persons on a conventional power plant than in solar or wind. You still have people for maintenance, but not as much, or it's definitely spread out, I guess. But these are jobs that are could be put together that you need skills that are life skills. If you're a welder or you're a technician of some sort, you could do these jobs. We could bring back manufacturing if we do this right. We actually have to bring back manufacturing because it's we need to you know you need to feed our people. There's nothing wrong with free trade. I love free trade. Trade is the engine of growth for the world. However, as we saw with the EpiPen, a lot of capital is using free trade to destroy the country that created their capital. And they were like, well, it doesn't matter. Let's go build this country. Then when they get tired of it, they'll rip that from underneath them. America, it was the greatest thing as and that's not cool because all these ideas, all this, it's the idea of America that creates more ideas. And when they're doing this, here's some capital, rip it out, destroy schools and things like that. I was watch this video about it was the Democrats never keeping up their promises, which is what they're paid to do since they become corporate. They were they use the Republicans to stall anything, and then the Democrats to kind of say, "Oh, see, the Democrats will kind of introduce it, and the Republicans will stall it." And this is done on purpose. Money's played on both parts, both sides, by the same entities. A lot of times with a lot more money going to the right wing because of the way or the right wing echo chamber is. So oh yeah, school districts. Where I grew up in Florida, school district was one county. And you just look in Chicago. He took a point of using Chicago's school districts and how they ripped it apart. And that's the same kind of crap where they'll say they're being liberal. People will say that they're being progressive and they're really caring about the country and everything. But then they create these little enclaves, little fiefdoms, and they destroy everything else. And then they complain about, oh, they're coming for your money. No, dude, no one's coming for your money. It's just like a business is the same thing as a house. You have to pay technically a capital gain on your property, called property taxes. What they're really afraid. Here's the thing: two things they're really afraid of. Jeff Bezos grew Amazon with the hypothesis of get big fast. Was Amazon spent like 10 years not making any money, but was worth billions. So that's your capital gains. That's your the gain in value, even though the company was not making money. One of the things, two of the things that told me that Trump was planning on tanking the economy is he got rid of the 2 year. Well, two. One is how he was the deduction. How to remove the state deductions. So if you had a state income tax, they removed the deductions. Two was the 2 years of it's been in finance books for years and years and years. 2 years, your last 2 years could be so if you lost a lot of money, so you're starting up a business, and your first 2 years you're just breaking even, or you're losing money. Well, in year three you make money. You can take those losses towards your taxes and actually make even more money because those losses. Trump got rid of that. And then looking at Romney's maneuver with trying to water down the 2012 Act on on the Jobs Act of 2012, it's showing that they're trying to not allow any middle class persons to catch up, and they're not allow and they don't want people to to grow their capital, because we know that capital's trying to set itself up to become kings or queens. They're trying to get rid of. They've been trying for years to get rid of the inheritance, or as they like to call it, death tax. Well, I should call it the lazy kids tax, and because we've seen that over and over again with generation after generation. By the third generation, it's usually spent anyways. But it just creates persons like Ivanka, and it doesn't lend well for the country to grow, especially as a capitalist society that really, in its core, that democratic system of up and down and grinding it out is what makes America really great. Some might say, well, we could do that on you can do that with others, but that's where other types of the EU, but in general, the American way of doing that requires people believing that it's. What was the best thing I was read? I think I was reading Adam Schiff's book. I think he was speaking to Bono, and the best thing he said is America is an idea. Our greatest export, more so than even the dollar itself, is the idea of America. And that's the goal of these foreign adversaries, is to destroy and erode the idea, our greatest export. And how many billions or trillions of dollars is the idea of America worth to the world? So oh, that's where we're at. And so one of the things I have is Elon Musk said, okay, put it to Twitter, take 10% to pay his gains for the year. Now, I would not ask his money, but sell his company, pay his taxes. But that's when some things would happen. And I don't. But there are ways we can write into the law where you can still. He doesn't have to sell the shares. He knows he can borrow against those shares. He knows he can borrow margin against those shares. He knows there are multiple different ways of using different strategies that have been used to pay taxes and maintain the capital, the ownership value of whatever businesses you're owning. So it's not about trying to take from the rich or trying to take from the middle class. It's saying everybody, the platform is the United States of America. I'm not a fan of taxes, but really nobody wants to pay taxes. So, especially short-term capital gains, so they really suck. But I get a lot from these from living in America. And two, what you got to watch out for in insurance and real estate, it's a 10-3 X. I call it 10-3 X, 1039, 1033, I think, for insurance products. But you can exchange it, and it's a little bit difficult and cumbersome. But you can say, okay, I'm selling this, and then I'm going to turn this into a long-term hold. So I'm going to take on more risk. Because if you're taking on more risk, we're going to lower your taxes. So he has multiple ways of, and lots of people who have bigger brains as far as different strategies and tactics they can use, where he doesn't have to sell his 10% shares, and in the end, he'll end up making more money. That's the same thing that happened at Standard Oil. Rockefeller ended up making way more money. He just didn't have singular control. Because Because if we don't do these things, if we don't create that, get money back into the real economy and get rid of this financialization, yeah, we're going to bankrupt ourselves. It's going to be such a stratified third world country. And to do that, we got to build factories here. We got to train people who, Apple, for instance, wanted to bring back up some of this manufacturing on its glass. And it was just a fiasco. And part of it, when I was reading the story several times, it seemed just like the culture, our culture, that gritty 9 to 5 work culture has been affected by it without a lot more blue collar workers, because it's just the way the executives are acting and playing little freaking frack games with the whole process of building this manufacturing plant that ended up going bank, and Apple had to change it to something else. It was the main reason that Apple had to end up taking a hit and losing money. Not just the fact that we didn't have the people to design it, but just the executives getting into their positions just by playing games as opposed to really creating value in the world. And we need to get away from that and back to creating value combined with our financialization, but they need to be coupled back together. And we can grow phenomenally because we need to have, Putin apparently is worth what supposedly was worth 200, $300 billion. We can't have the richest people being in other countries. That because or more precisely, can't have them being in other countries, but more scary, it's if they're the in a kleptocracy and taking over the country. Greed is all you do. Looking at keeping up with the Joneses. Well, if they're worth $200 billion, and at $200 billion you have to take over the country. No, we can't have that. That's just not cool at all. And you'd see that in a lot of actions if you know what's going on. However, unfortunately, my Republican colleagues have been brainwashed so badly, and it's irony because they talk about freedom, scream and yell about freedom. It's one of the things I used to think. I'd hate going to these RE meetings or deal, and they were just slimy. It was just frickin' slimy, and you couldn't have a straight conversation because you could sit there looking at them and you're having and for me, when I'm speaking to somebody, they literally split, and I can hear the different parts of their personality speaking, and they're telling me that, yeah, I'm about to screw you. And it's like, good God, man. So the integrity and stuff I had learned to grow up with, it seems to be so far gone with the Republican Party. But hey, they could be mean and angry, but and the only time they have integrity is if it's quote in group. If it's out group, I don't have to be. They don't have to be integrity. It's just a bunch of words, and that's what the Republican Party, from my perspective, has turned into, and it sucks. Yeah, but also by the fact the freedom that they're speaking of is freedom to be a king, a freedom to be a tyrant, a freedom to be a dictator. I can't allow somebody to have that freedom over me. That'd be un-American. But yet that's what they're advocating. But at the same time, as I've said before, I'm not a big fan of overly the commune, where a bunch of people have power over the individual. No, that's not cool either. But the individual comes from the commune, and the commune grows from the individual. So capitalism, letting people blossom, even the Chinese realize that, is worth it. But you always have to make sure that capital goes back in to build and keep the soil fertile for new and more growth. This is one that's really awesome. This is what we got to get through. Seniors, this is what they need. You got the donut that they're making a lot of money off of. It's the Medicare, Medicaid donut, as it's called, is a point where there's no coverage, and they fight tooth and nail because they can make so much. The insurance companies makes money off of that donut hole, as it's called. affordable housing. We need this. You saw this thing where in Palo Alto, it's these liberal, not even just liberal countries, counties, states, whatever. They're not living up to the values, and they're not. It's like California. It's turned into either very very rich and a homeless camp. You're either very rich or you're homeless. And that's not really cool, and that's not really American, all because they don't want to build high density living spaces and high density living spaces that are kept up. That is one of the things. So they can't be totally public housing, public private partnerships maybe, but because we saw what they did on purpose with public housing, it was just basically warehousing and preparing African Americans to be sent into another warehouse, i.e., the jail. So it was just squeezing all the money out of the African American from low income housing, which was actually once was very good. It was like a step up. You learned, you got into low income housing. You had to do your thing, and then you would move out to the suburbs. But that never happened. I don't think that was ever supposed to happen, to be honest. Then it was just to train African Americans to become renters and then go into the prison system. And yeah, the Dixie Republicans are just nefariously crappy human beings. And they're holding the country back from growing and being and as being as powerful as it can be, and holding back trade we can have with other countries. And that just seems so odd as an American to leave money on the table. Just not who we are. We're always about making a buck. It's the American dream for a reason. And I think you don't, I think you can be awake and believe it. I know George Carlin says you have to be asleep to believe it, but I believe it. But we got to continuously renew that belief. So this is a biggie. So that's today's video, and please go check these things out. And the idea of loss aversion, it's not just a narcissism. That's that the authors actually won a Nobel Prize in economics, if I remember correct, or he said psychology. But still, it's thinking about that loss aversion and thinking about, you have something, you don't want to give it away, and you don't want to lose it, even if you don't have it. It's better, and that's what the fear that the Republicans play on a lot right now. That's what the fear that Trump plays on. You're going to lose your position. You're going to lose your status. You're going to lose, and then you get angry, and then he gets his anger out on the crowd. And then he's happy, and then he tells the crowd to turn that direction, and so he then he's just a rageful, hateful person. When you start looking at the dynamics of what he's doing to the American populace. As I said, some things I agree with as far as, but at this point in time, it's, you know, there needs to be a reset towards workers because the average person's getting hammered. They're really getting hammered. It blows my mind when I see like $7 an hour. And like, dude, I made $7 an hour pulling carts, and then I moved up to like $8 an hour. You as a cashier in 93, 92. That's 30 years ago. And that's ridiculous. And that was good money then, but 30 years with inflation, that's nothing. You can't live on that. It's back to as a Gen Xer, it's when the old timer gives you a quarter and he says, "Don't spend it all in one spot." Okie dokie. So we have the opportunity, and The super rich know, they're just being overly greedy, and who am I to tell them if they're being greedy or not greedy? If the economy had stayed connected with, if the if the if the liquid economy, i.e., stock markets and bonds and all that, had stayed connected to the real economy, people who turned wrenches, who said that wages had gone with, then I could that's be a different argument. But the numbers don't justify the arguments. The numbers just justify pure greed and disregard, and then their actions and the disregard for our country is even worse. So remember, we have the other part of the Build Back Better, voting rights, of course, which deals with police reform, but voting rights, and you have the two voting rights. You have, see here, we have the John Lewis bill, which only really affects the South without any changes, and then we still got to get the For the People Act, even though Manchin created his watered down version, which is better than nothing. This is what he'll probably want to get. It was endorsed by Stacey Abrams, but he had his chance to put it through, and it tanked because Mitch McConnell does not care about this country. He does not care about ideas. I still personally believe his wife is a soft spy, but you know, because it just doesn't make sense. Everything doesn't make sense. What else is so get the For the People Act. Use those two because as a because when we said that okay, move For the People Act, move voting rights forward, then all of a sudden they want a prescription drug plan. So it tells me that they're not planning on passing the the BIF or the Human Infrastructure Plan. They were just going to throw that out there and figure it wasn't going to go through. Now force it through, get the prescription drugs, get the next one, keep pushing forward. Know that they're going to obstruct all the way through, but it has to be done, and people have to, because it brings back power to the people. People can do that whole lift yourself up by the bootstraps, so to speak, even though everyone usually helps everyone, even if because we're all living in the same society. So I see so too many times, but that's where we're at. What we have to do, what we can do, we must do. You know, you know, because that would create, especially For the People Act. This is one of the things they really hated was mail-in voting. They really hate mail-in voting because people become more active. Oh, my ballot shows up. I guess I got to vote. Can't have that now, could they? So, anyways, have a great day and rock on.